Okay. So that's what I do every day. What I do is I focus on taking on those tasks that I don't like doing, and I get them done first. So I organize my day, start out by saying, okay, what is it that I don't want to do, and that's the thing I do first. How many of you like to do that? How many of you like to start on the tough things first? Well, a couple of you. Because if you don't, what happens? You're going to procrastinate it. And if you procrastinate it, then it just sticks in your mind and it's going to be bothering you and you're not as efficient. So the way I found to be most efficient and get a lot done is by constantly doing the tough things first. So it's a good way to start your day. It's a good way to learn discipline. Doing the things you don't like doing, of course, is why we don't succeed. Not doing the things, I should say, we don't like doing is the reason we don't succeed, and that's why we procrastinate our homework, or we procrastinate doing our visiting or home teaching, or procrastinate going to the temple, is because it's not something that is fun. It's something that we really enjoy doing. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, before I conclude, is a little bit about how I started Micrel. I'm in the semiconductor industry, and it's a technology industry, and it's part of the electronics, or they call the high-tech group. Ever heard of the term Silicon Valley? So Silicon Valley, it got its name because the wafers that we use to make the electronics are made out of silicon. And so they refer to the Bay Area in the San Francisco area as Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is where the hub, as you would, of technology is, both in terms of software as well as semiconductor technology, and also the medical research. When I started Micrel back in 1978, I did it without the benefit of venture funding. Now, what venture funding is, for those of you who are not business majors, these are people who will finance your company by taking a large ownership position in the company, generally 50+%, but they put up all the money. In other words, you put up the sweat, they put up the money. But because they're putting up the money, he who has the gold has the gun. So they really dictate how you run your company if you're venture funded. And I did not want to be venture funded because I didn't want them to tell me how to run the company. I was 39 years old, and I just didn't. I thought I knew it all and had all the abilities. I was a bishop at the time, and I thought that I knew what to do, and I didn't want the venture capitalists telling me how to run the company. In fact, I still believe this today, that if you can start your own company without using venture funding, that you're better off, because at least you can control your own destiny. I still own 20% of my company. That we're a public company on NASDAQ. And I still own 20% of it. But that's how you do it. Is if you do it with your own money, your own sweat, then you have control. So I did this with bank financing. Now, the bank did not want to finance Micrel because they don't like funding technology. That's the job of the venture capitalists. They take all the risk, but they also take all the ownership. So as a consequence, I ended up with a lot of covenants that were very difficult. So what covenants are, if those of you who've accepted a covenant baptism know, there's a lot of restrictions, things that you agree to do. And so as a entrepreneur, and I had to be willing to accept the covenants and conditions that the bank would put on me. And I'm probably not keeping up, am I? Am I behind? Am I there now? Okay. There are two things I mean, there were more than two, but the two main things that the bank asked of me was that I guarantee all the debts of the company, and of course, that takes a lot of gumption to be willing to accept all the debts. At the time in 1978, that was up to $4.5 million, and that was more than I had. I mean, they literally could take me and and my family and everybody else. I mean, that was way more than I had, but I guaranteed up to $4.5 million that if the company did not succeed, I'd be liable to pay that back. The second thing that they asked me to do, which was a more difficult thing, was that I had to be profitable every year, that I could not lose money. Now, they allowed me to lose money 1/4 or 1/4 the time out of the year, but that the overall year still had to be profitable. And so that was the most difficult one, because generally when you're in a startup situation, you end up, there's costs in research and development and other development costs that end up really affecting your bottom line. And so it was very difficult for me to remain profitable. But the fact that on the one hand, I had the personal guarantee gun to my head, and then the other hand, being profitable, I had to make those two work. So it was the fact that I had to organize a company in such a way that was very disciplined, and so that meant I had to run the company. See, I don't know where I am in my talk here. That I had to run the company to a very stringent model. And so, again, not all of you are business majors, but you understand what a model is. A model is a performance curve. And, when you go for your temple recommended reviews, there's a lot of questions they ask you, and then you have to comply or comport to those questions in a way which will allow you to get your recommend. And the same thing with the bank. They had all these covenants, and so then I had to run a model such that the model then would allow me to meet those covenants. So the company had a very, very strict financial model. Even to this day, Micrel is run to a very, very strict financial model, and we have been profitable 32 out of 33 years. So that's a record in our industry. By the way, no one has ever achieved that before in technology, to be profitable that often. In fact, the company has been profitable 118 out of 130 quarters. So that's even more miraculous, is to have that level of profitability. Now, the company was so well disciplined and so well structured that even during the worst recession that our industry ever had, which was in 2009, for those of you who can recall back to 2009, the economy was going through some difficult times. My company lost 20% of its revenue during that period, and even with that difficult recession of 2009, we still made money. And so again, we couldn't have done that unless we had run a very disciplined operation. Am I not caught up again?